Joining us this morning is Republican Texas Congressman Roger Williams. Congressman Williams, good to see you, sir. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us on again.
Can you walk us through what a government shutdown looks like? How do people get impacted?
Well, I mean, first of all, a shutdown is negative. I don't think anybody wants a shutdown. But, you know, if you shut the government down, there are certain things that will still go on. There'll be people that will not be going to work. They won't be paid. They'll eventually be paid. But it's a bad way of doing business. And, you know, I'm one of those undecided still. I represent Fort Hood, Texas. I want to make sure the military's taken care of in this CR as we move forward. So it's not a good way to do business, but I don't think it's a shutdown vote as much as it's a vote on a better way to do business.
So what are you undecided about specifically? In terms of the military spending, will those budget caps be lifted? Where are the holes as you see it?
Well, first of all, the CR, I mean, it's a continuing resolution is what it means. And it means we continue to do business as we've done in the past. And we know in the past it creates a deficit, and which is not good. We've got to address that eventually. But from the military standpoint, we've made a lot of promises. We've got a pay raise out there. We've got buildings that infrastructure is being built on these bases. We've promised more weaponry and so forth. So I want to make sure that everything, if we pass the CR, that those promises are going to be kept, and that's what we'll be looking at today.
Congressman, it's Lindsey Bell here. This is going to be, I think, the fourth CR since October. How can this be good business to keep doing these short-term stopgap measures? When are we going to get a full budget for the full year?
Well, that's exactly right. I come from the private sector. I'm a business person, and the idea of continuing to do business as you've done in the past, which is frankly not a good model, it creates a deficit. We've got to get off that. We've got to get back to where we're passing bills and we have a budget. And quite frankly, it's hard to see how we're going to get there, but I, for one, like many, want to get there, and a CR is not the way to do it.
But how do you get there, sir? I mean, this is what Don Peebles has been saying this morning. Republicans are in charge. How come you can't get there?
Well, Republicans are in charge, and that's a good question. But you know, we've got moving parts within our delegation. People like me we don't want to increase the debt. There's a lot of issues out there that have to do with the CR. I've been here since 2012, and this is all new to me from the private sector to continue spending at a rate that creates a deficit. So we've got to get the Senate too involved, and they've got to pass legislation we've already passed here in the House to begin to create a budget.
Yeah, Congressman Don Peebles. I'm a business person as well, but I had the pleasure of spending my last 2 years of high school on the Hill when the PAGE program existed. And even back then, Congress would operate with these continuing resolutions. And doesn't it require a rule change or some change in conduct in terms of how the House operates in terms of the budgetary process? Why not run the Congress like you and I run our businesses? We have an annual budget. We approve that budget, and that's what we operate within. And without that budget, nothing gets done.
Well, that's right. That's how we do it in business. That's how the states do it. And, of course, I'd be one that supports a balanced budget amendment each year to create a budget and address your spending with the amount of revenue you've got coming in. You know, we've got tax reform, which you've talked about and which I see is working unbelievably. We're going to have more cash flow coming in. If we could bring our expenses down to that level, that's what we ought to do. I mean, that's a simple 101 in business. And when I ran for Congress, that's one of the things I want to do is bring business principles to Washington, and we're trying to do that.
Yeah, the Congressman, though, your body, of course, is the epitome of compromise, unfortunately, as opposed to standing for and acting on what's in the best interest of the country. We can't serve everybody. The government can't solve every problem and can't pay for everything, just like our businesses and the American households can't afford to pay for everything. How come Congress cannot operate with that basic thesis?
Well, I've said all along I'd like for Congress or the government to do three things: collect our taxes, defend our borders, and help us with infrastructure, and then get out of the way and let the private sector work, let the states work. And that's the model that I'd like to see happen. And that's a model I'm trying to continue to support.
Well, we want to talk about that model because the key issue in this particular situation is immigration and the hot items, DACA, and the president's campaign promise to build that border wall. Here's Chief of Staff John Kelly last night and how he addressed it with Brett Baer.
Customs and Border Protection men and women came in, did a survey of the border. There are places where hydrographically, geographically, a wall would not be realistic. There are other parts of the southwest border that are so wild and untamed that there is no traffic that goes through them. There's other places, we think about 800 miles additional wall to include the 600 that are already in place. The fencing would suffice. So he has evolved in the way he's looked at things.
And then, Congressman, the president tweeted his thoughts on the wall this morning, saying this: "The wall is the wall. It has never changed or evolved from the first day I conceived of it. Parts will be of necessity, see-through, and it was never intended to be built in areas where there is natural protection, such as mountains, wastelands, or tough rivers or water. The wall will be paid for directly or indirectly or through longer-term reimbursement by Mexico, which has a ridiculous $71 billion trade surplus with the U.S. The $20 billion wall is peanuts compared to what Mexico makes from the U.S. NAFTA is a bad joke." So, Congressman Williams, is that where the pushback is? The wall, well, is that what your Democratic colleagues are saying no deal to?
Well, it sounds like it, but I would tell you, being from Texas and being a former Secretary of State, I know about the border. We have to secure this border first, and it's got to be, the wall to someone like me is technology. It might be brick and mortar. It's also, in most part, boots on the ground, which we need more boots on the ground to begin to make people go through the ports of entry rather than between the ports. So I think the wall and the DACA issue certainly sounds like an issue for the Democrats, but we need to address that. Of course, DACA is not due till March 5th, I think it is. So we need to get it right. But my feeling is we do need to secure the border first, and then move on to see who's here and how we're going to take care of those folks.
And Mary Kissel, you mentioned that earlier. The deadline for DACA is not until March.
Yeah, and it looks like the budget negotiations are going to be separated from the immigration deal. But, the question I have is, what do Democrats want for a deal? Because essentially, Maria, Republicans have offered them more money, more non-entitlement spending money, and funding for CHIP, the Child Health Care Insurance Program. So what do they want? Because from my perspective, they're not negotiating here in good faith. If they were, we would have had a deal days ago.
What about that, Congressman?
Well, I think that's right. It seems as if, as you talk further, that the Democrats, if President Trump or Republicans are for it, they're against it, no matter what. I mean, they're go back several years, and their rhetoric on DACA and those here that are here illegally almost sounds, in many cases, like the statement Republicans make. So I think if the president's for it, they're against it. That's no way to make a deal. It's no way to run a business.
Yeah. Real quick, Congressman, before you go, you're on Financial Services Committee. What should we expect in terms of the rollback in regulations as it relates to financial services?
Well, earlier you were talking about the bank, the community bank relief and so forth, doing away with, beginning to dismantle the Dodd-Frank legislation, CFPB. That's what we're doing. We've got some legislation over at the Senate. I know the president will sign it as soon as it gets it on his desk. But we see Main Street America breathing again, because now community banks can compete for people's business, can make loans to small businesses and let them expand with taxes lowered. It's going to be a great combination.
So the timing on that is what?
Oh, I think that you'll, well, like I say, you could see that any time. I hope that the Senate will take this legislation up we sent over from the House and get it to the president's desk as soon as possible. So I don't know what the timing is, but right now it'd be great.
Any other thoughts on Dodd-Frank in terms of holding capital? Is that changing?
Well, as far as the banks are concerned, we got legislation where they can have an off-ramp. In some cases, a bank can decide to carry more capital, and they can begin to get out of the Dodd-Frank and compete for business.
Congressman, good to see you, sir. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Congressman Roger Williams there.